Part 3 is what I call STDs, spiritually transmitted delusions. I have a friend, a brilliant friend, performance artist, Alita Rose. I noticed in an Instagram post she was writing about STDs, spiritually, sexually transmitted demons. Well, that's a very important and related subject, but I'll leave that to her post on sexually transmitted demons. But this is spiritually transmitted delusions, and what do I mean by spiritually transmitted delusions? How do you become an STD carrier? How STDs are transmitted and the damage done. So the reason I say spiritually transmitted diseases, we're not talking about false teachings. Or we're not talking about erroneous well, we're not talking about false teachings. False teachings is either a person has convinced themselves or been convinced of a false teaching and seeks to impose it on you or lead you into it, either knowing it's false, a con, or being mistaken themselves, and there's no substance to it. But an STD the carrier of an STD has to be someone who actually has had an experience, does have a dimension of spiritual understanding, does have experiences, does have a grounding of some degree in spiritual, on the spiritual path, in spiritual practice. That's the carrier, see? The STD is something wrapped in earnestness. STD is something wrapped in experience. And so it has validity, it has throughput, it has some energy to it because it's sincere. But it's something that, so that's how it's carried. Through good intentions and through, again, knowledge, which is, all knowledge is incomplete, but an insufficient, a base of knowledge, an insufficient grounding in experience. So the damage done, well, it misleads you, it wastes your time, we go in circles. I'll give you some examples. So, well, there are, I don't doubt that there are many types of STDs, or many strains, but I want to talk just about one that I've identified called usurper. And I call it usurper because what it does really is it's turning something into its opposite. Instead of union, right? Instead of union, liberation, awakening, it delivers isolation, imprisonment, and ignorance, all in pursuit of union, awakening, and liberation. Instead of setting you free, it holds you back. Instead of expanding your view, it cabins and constrains you. It limits your view. It actually shrinks your view. That's why I say it's usurper, because the intention is liberation. The intention is an expanded view, but the result is its opposite. So three strains of usurper that I want to share with you, of the usurper STD. The first one is what I call the table of erroneous correspondences. What do I mean by the table of erroneous correspondences? Let me give you an example. Strain A, table of erroneous correspondences. False characterizations drawn from misleading application of provisional symbols. is a big problem. It's a big problem. We see it in many worthwhile books of occult teaching. You see it in many useful yoga teacher training manuals. It's in many of our minds. What do I mean by this table of erroneous correspondences? For example, male, sky, sun, yang, white, active. Female, moon, earth, yin, black, passive. It can go on and on. Does that table have some degree of correctness in the relative? Yes, but it is so limited it's so limited in its expression. The truth is much more complex. It's much more multifarious. It's myriads of more complexity to the truth than what is implied by this table of correspondences. And it leads into things because what does black end up being? Black ends up also not only being associated with yin, earth, female, moon, it also ends up being associated, darkness and blackness being associated with evil and ignorance. And so we say things like, lead me from the darkness into the light. This is a result of a table of erroneous correspondences. And you end up going around in circles. Padmasambhava in the Great Liberation, he says, he compares he talks about the clear light of the voidness, he talks about the Dharmakaya, and he likens it to a cloudless sky. And then he says, and knowing the all consciousness in one's own mind, one knows it to be void of quality as the sky. But then he's very careful to say that the sky is only a provisional symbol, and it's only meant. It's a symbol, but it's only meant provisionally. In other words, it's not literally the sky, and the sky isn't the complete. It's not completely analogous to the full scope of what the all consciousness is, right? But in the table of erroneous correspondences, it becomes that. The provisional, it's a table of erroneous correspondences is loaded up with provisional symbols that are tethered then to each other to lead you into implications of what the truth is that are untrue. So this table of erroneous correspondences has to be broken up, has to be completely broken up. And it's much more dynamic. The nature of correspondences is much more dynamic. And you have to remember this whole Padmasambhava's warning about the provisional nature of symbols. Right? You have to have 1 foot on the symbol and 1 foot off. You have to hold on to the symbol, but let go of it at the same time. The second strain B, that was strain A. Second strain B, is what I call disempowering means. I'll give you an example of one. What you resist persists. What you resist persists. Some of us heard this one a lot in 2016, the crisis that ensued in 2016 in our nation and in the world. What you resist persists. By fighting fascism, you're just making it stronger. What you resist persists. Well, there's a relative truth to the statement, what you resist persists. It has a Taoist dimension to it. It is an aspect of truth, but it is misapplied in many ways. Many ways, in most ways, really. It's misapplied. It is more often not appropriate than it is appropriate. It is certainly not appropriate in the political world, the political theater. It's certainly not appropriate in healing or in psychological work in terms of understanding something that's gone wrong and embracing a path of healing. In dealing with abuse, what you resist persists is not the solution. So, disempowering memes, there are others, but I'll leave you with that one and I'll go on to strain C. In other words, whatever, a meme that somehow you've heard it so often, you repeat it yourself because you've heard it so often with great authority, and it seems to make sense. And it also, you know, that what you resist persists, particularly in relation to the political crisis. You know, it allows you to escape your responsibilities. It allows you to escape the challenge of understanding what your own will is and how to exercise it. What the true limits, true scope and limits of your own will is. What you resist persists, allows you to forfeit that challenge in ways that are not helpful to you, not healing. The strain C is what I call big picture perversions. It's perhaps the most virulent strain of usurper. Here are two examples. One big picture perversion is divine authorship of everything. The divine authorship of everything. Well, yes, many teachers, yoga teachers, have painted themselves into the corner, into a corner with this big picture perversion in the course of a 45-minute noon yoga class, when you might say how everything happens in our lives is determined by divine will. Well, and divine intelligence is in everything. So someone will say, well, what about Hitler? And off you go into a very convoluted, pointless, and futile discussion that can only go from messy to worse. So you know, what about evil? And so divine authorship of everything, if you fully embrace that big picture perversion, that strain C of usurper, if you fully embrace that, you end up giving arguments about how nothing is really evil. And everything happens for a reason. Well, everything does happen for a reason, but not in the way that a human mind could possibly comprehend it. So confusion overtakes us. And this misteaching is so facile, so warped. Divine authorship of everything, yes. Everything means everything, but everything means everything. And within that everything, there is a whole lot going on, including randomness. There's randomness within that everything. There's what chaos theory is trying to get our minds around. That's within that everything. There is a whole lot to that divine authorship. It's not micromanaging. There's randomness, there's chaos theory. There's a lot going on inside of everything that does not mean that the divine intelligence is micromanaging everything within that everything, right? Big picture perversions. The other big picture perversion that I want to draw your attention to is the oneness versus duality story. Duality bad, oneness good. Oh, your thinking is so dualistic. Your political thinking or your approach to psychological problems, it's so dualistic. It's all a oneness, right? And to really get to the truth, you have to rise above this duality and embrace the oneness, and your understanding will unfold from there. big picture perversion? Well, the reality is, it isn't duality versus oneness, or even duality and duality/oneness. Actually, the reality, the truth, the reality, the truth of our existence is in the granularity of everything. The granularity of everything. Oneness itself is in the granularity of everything, beyond duality, beyond this and that. This and that is a false construct of the mind. It's not that simple. Reality isn't that simple. So if you want to be present with reality and have a sense and an expanding scope, a deepening understanding of the nature of reality, you have to allow for the granularity of everything, the individuality of every grain within that everything, the uniqueness of everything, right? And so the complexity of everything, the truth of oneness is found in granularity and specificity and the uniqueness of everything. It's very different from the infected state of, oh, let's rise up into oneness and leave duality behind. Life is much richer than that. Life is much richer than that. This, by the way, is the Chinnamasta yantra, the yantra of the one of the 10 tantric goddesses, right? She's the headless goddess. Well, the headless, she's her decapitated head. She decapitates her head, and the blood spurts out into 3 fountains, and they nourish the 2 goddesses, or 2 attending goddesses, and the 3rd stream pours into her decapitated skull. Chinnamasta yantra, very powerful. Multiple meanings speak out through the powerful image, the interdependence of life, death, and sexuality, the awakening of Kundalini and the STDs, the eradication of ignorance, all of that. Very powerful symbol, which some people would tell you not to use or invoke at all. But agoris are not afraid. So, to finish with the subject of spiritually transmitted delusions in general and usurper in particular, I want to give you some ways to boost your mystical immune system. Ways to boost your mystical immune system. First of all, they might surprise you. First of all is to find and resource, turn to your true primal conscience. And by that I mean, we all inherit a social conscience imposed by society, in some ways very helpful, in other ways very hurtful. But beyond all of that, and that changes from society to society, culture to culture, age to age, but beyond that, civilization to civilization, but beyond that, before that, we are born with an innate conscience. It is a native conscience, pure, primal conscience. It's in you. You know. Not the morality imposed by the social order, not necessarily opposed to it, or by your family or in your tradition. Your own native, innate, pristine, inborn conscience, which has been with you from before the beginning. It's that depth of you that just knows intuitively true right from true wrong. It can't explain it, it just knows. Your true conscience. Turn to that. Move from that. Second is to chop wood and carry water. Zen. A Zen expression, chop wood and carry water, and literally chopping wood and carrying water. Whatever that looks like in your circumstances. some forms of manual labor, outdoor activity that sustains, keeps us strong, it keeps us honest, it grounds us, it moves us from the belly, from the physical center, from the root and from the feet, chopping wood and carrying water, being in touch tactilely with the granularity of everything in its physical dimension. Work. The third one is something that Madame Blavatsky, the founder of the Theosophical Society, gave to us, and our friend Joe Miller, my Yoda, gave to us, the common sense of humor, and more common sense. Blavatsky told this to a gathering, her circle, and she said, this is the most, in essence, she said, this is the most mystical, most occult teaching I can give you. Common sense, sense of humor, and more common sense. Again, this is not analytic. This is not intellectual. It's more of it's of the intuitive, and of the gestalt and of the somatic. It's in your body. Common sense does not come so much from the mind as it does from your beingness itself. And sense of humor, where does laughter really come from? It's not an equation. Laughter, it comes from something that's kind of the real laughter, not the cruel laughter or derisive laughter, the real genuine laughter, the belly laugh. Belly laugh comes from the nature of being, from beyond the mind. And the last one, well, the second to the last, what I would call somatic, intuitive, almost as if olfactory information, right? Information that comes to you from your five bodies, not just the mental body or even the mental body and the feeling body, but also the intuitive body and also the physical body and also the etheric body, the body of space, right? All five bodies bring us information if we listen. If we feel into it, if we open ourselves to the information, somatic and intuitive information from beyond the analytical processes of the mind, from beyond words, from before words, from below words, right? Really below and before, even more than beyond. And I say almost olfactory because like one brilliant young poetess I know, like it smells. This smells. Things have a smell. It's a somatic kind of smelling. This doesn't smell right. Boosts your immune system to rely on these forms of intelligence, these forms of information. And the last one is to as we said, dig into the granularity. Forget that table of erroneous correspondences. Forget the big perversion, the big picture perversions. Forget the disempowering memes and dig into the granularity of life, into the granularity of our experiences, our circumstances, our karmas, the complexity of your quest, the complexity of this quest. Dig there for mystical secrets. The mystical secrets of the universe are in that granularity, in that complexity. And that's where we come to the truth of what it is to be human. So that's the third of these 5 sections. And I'm going to close this section out, and I will resume again for part 4, which is the problem with men and some radical remedies. And I will start that up in a few moments. I hope you join us.